Sounds great.
Okay, perfect. So with that, the recording has begun. I'd like to introduce everybody to Marshall Brown. He is the director of Save the Great South Bay and is going to take time today to share with us the mission of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and now I'll share my screen, Marshall, and just let's make sure everybody is able to see that. Can I get a nod or a thumbs up that everyone can see the screen?
Looks great.
If you want to put it in presentation mode, we'll be able to see it bigger.
I'm doing that. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, first off, this whole Save the Great South Bay had a prelude. I was a tech entrepreneur. I brought Wi-Fi to the city parks all during the late 90s. I was working with a number of different startups and met more than my share of women in tech. Very good friend of mine, she has a company called CrowdSmart, and what they do is they evaluate, using expert opinion and artificial intelligence, what startups are likely to succeed or not. And interestingly enough, over 80% of the companies that were picked accurately as winners were run by women. So there's something to really think about there. People are underestimating how vital the women entrepreneurship is, in fact. So just
not this group. We're all for it.
Good, good. So yeah, Save the Great South Bay. It started at my 35th high school reunion. We'd all gone back to our hometown and saw what had happened to our bay, and we're horrified. And we all said, somebody's got to do something about this. And at that moment, it was some 7 years ago, I went from being a tech entrepreneur to, let's say, being an environmental one. Entrepreneurship has been a very important part of our success. If you look at how we're structured, we have 16 different creek defenders, one in every shore community, and it's really upon them to organize with the local schools, local civic groups, local businesses, so that the community itself can become good stewards of the local creeks and waters. Now, let me just back up and jump into the presentation here, because I think people really, if they don't understand what we're facing, then they need to know. If they do, then this is actually a good summary of it. I'm sure you're all familiar with all the algal blooms that we're having in various bays, and that's all coming from the fact that our groundwater is highly nitrogenous. We have 500,000 cesspools and septic tanks sitting in sandy soil all over Long Island. And that nitrogen seeps out into the groundwater and then into our bays, rivers, and ponds. We also have a significant nitrogen load from, guess what? Lawn fertilizers. The suburban fetish of the lawn has had its consequences. And finally, there's road runoff. There's atmospheric deposition onto our roadways, and with every good rain that goes into one of thousands of outfall pipes throughout Long Island into our rivers and streams. And what's really very daunting is it's the size of the problem. It's coming from everywhere. What Save the Great South Bay does is we look for scientifically validated means of removing nitrogen from our environment. And we do that primarily through native plantings. We have people who are experts in botany, in landscape design, who will plant natives along creeks or on their lawns. We don't call them lawns, we call them yards. We don't like lawns so much. We love yards though. Yards are wild. They're native. We follow Teddy Roosevelt's precept, which is we need to create a little wilderness in our yards. So there you have it. What do? Implement native plantings. We defend our creeks. I alluded to the Creek Defender program a little earlier. And it's really stunning to see just how much local energy there is, community by community, going from Massapequa, Amityville, Lindenhurst, Babylon, Sable, Oakdale, Blue Point. I left out a couple, but there are 16 communities on the South Shore and 36 rivers and creeks that flow through those communities into the bay. We're fond of saying that the bay is a symptom. It's the mainland that's sick. So if we can improve the water quality coming from the mainland, we stand a shot at bringing back the bay. It was very dramatic what happened with the Great South Bay. In 1976, 40% of the water was filtered by the clams each day. But with decreased water quality and over clamming, frankly, there were tough economic times in the late 70s on Long Island. A lot of people went to make some extra money on the bay, and along came 1985, where the bay basically tipped over. It was an environmental collapse. 6,000 people lost their livelihoods from one day to the next. This was a generations-long thing. All these South Shore towns are they're seaside villages, really, and this really took away seemingly a way of life. So we're very much about starting where you're standing. We're hyper local, if you will. Nobody cares more about the bay than the people who live on it, and it's only the South Shore that's really going to save it. So with that, we engage various constituencies from the scientific community, but of course the baymen themselves, local residents. We get people involved. It's very empowering to have parents with kids come out and help with the native plantings. Have 30, 50, 70, 100 people involved in a local cleanup. People really getting their hands dirty, and the rest of them too. Frankly, it can get pretty muddy and messy there. But I spent my years 8 to 15 in the woods, muddied and dirtied, and that to me was childhood. So this is a way of our returning to nature and really embracing the nature that's right in our communities and in our backyard.
I think it was last Earth Day, with Robin and all of our children combined, we participated in Babylon Village in the creek cleanup. And it really does feel good. Like, I kept thinking, I was going there thinking, like, my backyard could use a cleanup. Why am I going to the village? But then you start to feel like you're a part of something much bigger than yourself. And that if everybody can band together, a lot can get accomplished. And it's a really great feeling, Marshall. I just have to second that.
The amount of trash, car tires, mattresses, rugs, the stuff that we're pulling out of these woods is just astounding. But to get back to what you just said, there's actually a lot that could be done in your own yard beyond just planting native plants. One of the enormous issues that we face on Long Island is invasive plants, non-native plants. You would be hard pressed to find native plants for sale at our various gardening centers. Now that is really bad news because what's happened really for hundreds of years is that we've introduced all sorts of plants from other places in the world because they look pretty. The ornamentals. They say, well, plant an ornamental, the bugs won't eat them. Well, of course the bugs won't eat them because the bugs here evolved over, hundreds of millions of years to eat certain things. The non-natives don't look like, they're invisible to them. They don't look like food. And that's true not just with the bugs, but the birds. So by introducing plants that aren't from here, that have no natural enemies, well, what happens. If you've ever dealt with wisteria or Japanese mile-a-minute or Japanese honeysuckle or the Chinese tree of life, or there's just English ivy is invasive. Look at if you drive down any of the parkways, what will you see? Tree after tree after tree being strangled to death by ivy, right? So what we need is really a broad public education about the importance of native plantings, and also an awareness as to what an invasive is and how to kill it. Because if we don't start to restore native habitat here, we're going to really feel the brunt of what is a wave of global extinction. We've lost 1% of our insects and bugs since 1964 each year. And the main reason for that is habitat loss. If we on Long Island can restore habitat, including in our yards, we can blunt that effect and help to preserve our local species.
So how do we do a native planting? Is there some certain stores or garden centers that have more native plants, or how do we identify them and then purchase them and kind of convert?
Well, that's an excellent question. We're actually quite involved in trying to build the infrastructure around that, working with groups like the Long Island Native Plant Initiative, which works out of these Sisters of St. Joseph's, that 212-acre former convent in Brentwood. They have 28 acres that they're devoting to organic farming, but also the growing of native plantings. There's also a couple of greenhouses that are staffed by people with developmental disabilities, one in West Sayville at the Maritime Museum and another in Brookhaven Township. The garden centers,
okay.
The garden centers, though, they if people don't know to order native plants, then there's a problem. So what we're doing is we're developing products that people can buy without really having to think about what's native or non-native. Here's your bioswale. Here's your Zen garden. Here's your rain garden. Mm-hmm. And those would be composed of a mixture of trees, plants, bushes, and shrubs, all native, that all belong together. Now, you mentioned you were helping out in Babylon during Creek Defender Day there. Were you part of the planting of the swamp forest?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there were 16 different plants, bushes, trees, and shrubs, all arranged. It's what would be there if we weren't there, you see. We're trying to replicate these habitats. There's a pit and mound construction, if you will. So if you were to look around in Southern's Pond or around the woods there, you would see the same thing that we had reconstructed there, also around in the area. So it's more than just planting a native tree and then calling it a day. It's about rebuilding.
Okay, so I've got a few kind of chats in the comment section, and I think maybe I could work with Robin after this, and we could come together with a few links on what the websites or the information around native planting so that we could start to become more aware of how to do this ourselves. And we can share that out after the call. And also, Aracey is sharing that she knows a Girl Scout who did her Gold Award, and the subject was educating people about planting Long Island hardy plants.
Wonderful.
And she did that with Brookville Science Learning Center and worked with Nassau County BOCES on that.
Well, we need to encourage and celebrate these projects. We're helping an Eagle Scout in Blue Point bring natives into a local preserve, which is overrun with invasives.
Yeah.
Hey, Marshall, if I could jump in for a second.
Please.
Sure, Robin.
Thanks. I think it's really important, and it's one of the, within our three-prong approach of cleaning the creeks and promoting or advocating for native plantings and shellfish restoration. All of this really is, of course, there's the physical part of it, but there's the educational side of involving young people in this. And so every time we promote a program or run a program, we're really looking to incorporate students and younger kids, because this is their bay. I mean, it's, they're going to be living on this bay for the next 70 years. And it's really important for us to connect with the students and younger people and spread this message to them, who I find they're extremely receptive to it. Jean, I think you can say we shared the experience of the kids love being out there on the creek cleanups, and when it has an impact on them, it has a tremendous impact on them.
It's true. So my daughter, who's a senior, entering senior year in high school, she's so savvy about where she shops. She actually shops at Patagonia because they're a B Corp. I think the kids will look and see, like, if I'm using a plastic straw, it's, they have a different awareness than I had at their age about the limited resources and that it's our job to protect them. So I think that they really are, like, people usually talk about the next generation as being, negatively with, the rock and roll or whatever previous generation said. But I look at our children and I think they're going to do a lot of good. And as we can share this information, they'll do more good.
I completely agree. I became an environmentalist in 1969 when I was in 5th grade. And that was because it was in the air. The next year was the first Earth Day, of course. And I remember what the bay smelled like back then, and it wasn't good. There's they have a whole lifetime to really be good stewards here. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't discuss the role of oystering and shellfish as a means of cleaning our environment. One oyster can filter up to 50 gallons of water a day. And I mentioned what happened to the bay when the clams couldn't keep up with the water pollution. We can reverse that as we improve water quality. We can reintroduce shellfish. We can expand our aquaculture. We lost what would today be $1 billion shellfishing industry when we lost clamming. But increasingly, we're seeing oystermen. There might have been like 10 people working the bay 10 years ago. Now there's over 100. So we're moving in the right direction there. But if we don't continue to improve our water quality, really, if you will, fighting against the tide. But that's a very exciting means by which to heal the bay, bring the shellfish back where we can, and then we create a virtuous cycle around that.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about? I had attended this session that you had. Some of your learning sessions. The last one was methylprane, emerging contaminants, and the marshlands. And Abbott Labs is a supporter of Save the Great South Bay. Could you share a little bit?
It's York Analytical Labs, actually.
York Analytical Labs. Thank you for that correction. Could you share a little bit about what they're doing on the testing side and the technology that they're using?
Sure. I mean, first of all, we're very much guided by science. We believe that you need to show results. So anything that we do, we want to measure the before and after effects. Now, York Analytical Labs, testing for emerging contaminants is very much a growth industry on Long Island. And part of it is because we are finding things like 1,4-dioxane, which is in all sorts of household products and then gets into our water supply. We're finding that it's a carcinogen at parts per billion. And then there's the PFAS, PFOS, think Teflon, these flame retardant compounds. They're at parts per trillion. So because of that, York has had to invest significantly in state-of-the-art equipment to test for it. And it's a sobering thing. Neither of these issues are on our radar 2 years ago. But now the governor is spending $581 million to build a ring of wells along the southern state, sort of south of the Bethpage plume, so that over 20 years, 1 trillion gallons of water can be stripped of the 1,4-dioxane. Pretty astounding. And as for these flame retardants, PFASs, that's that's a whole other challenge as to how to remove that. I understand it may be easier than the dioxane, but it's imperative that we protect our drinking water. We live on top of it's a sole source aquifer. So anything that we put on the ground eventually gets into our drinking water. We find traces of 117 different pesticides in our drinking water, as a for instance.
I came away from that session just realizing how technical and how involved the testing and then the rehabilitation process is. So to identify there's a contaminant and then to fix it is so involved, which made me just realize, like, for myself, like, how can I help with prevention so that we don't end up with the problem or worsen the problem? I don't know. Are you familiar, Marshall? Donna has in the chat group that she's involved with a group called Wild Birds Unlimited, and they encourage areas to have bees and butterflies during migration seasons. So I'm not familiar with it, but it does touch on, you mentioned there's a 1% decline in insects, and it's really like you need the full, we need the mosquitoes in order to have the bats, or we need bats in order to get rid of the mosquitoes so that we don't have to apply the pesticide. And we certainly need the bees to have all of the pollination happening. So are there other things we should be thinking about in terms of prevention? Certainly the native plants, and we can share some links there.
Well, I love the idea of pollinator gardens. That's one of the bundles that we're looking to see in the market. I think everybody would like to see, milkweed and monarch butterflies. And now you mentioned the mosquitoes, and one thing that people should do is, if they have a mosquito problem, there are ways to deal with them that don't involve poisons. There's a BTI, which is a naturally occurring bacterium that kills the mosquitoes, and it's as good as methoprene. Now, one thing that you could do if you are in an area that sprays for mosquitoes, you should phone the county and get on the no spray list. And one of the things that we're working on with the Sierra Club of Long Island is to have enough people complain in strategically that, in effect, we would be able to ban mosquito spraying in a given area. If you can't spray within 500 feet of a house and you get a house every 500 feet, well, they're done. The reason methoprene is such bad news is that while it prevents mosquito larvae from developing into full-grown mosquitoes, it also mosquitoes are in the family Arthropoda. That is a family. In other words, there are a lot of other things that are arthropods that aren't mosquitoes, and they suffer by it as well, including the dragonflies that eat them. So, we really need, as people devoted to science, we need to understand how we employ nature to address the for this particular problem. But again, nature's a great architect. We should build according to its specifications.
And what about kind of advocacy? Because you mentioned phoning the county to get on the no spray list. Are there links on your website about government organizations where we should be making our feelings known as voters?
We will periodically post on the methoprene issue, probably about a dozen posts by this point. But it's the same. It's the same deal every year at the county legislature. They vote to continue the spraying program, and it's largely because, well, people don't like to be bitten by mosquitoes, and so the county will claim it's a matter of disease control, which, the mosquitoes that carry West Nile and Eastern encephalitis are freshwater mosquitoes. And they're spraying for salt. So, keep this in mind. Anytime you've been bitten by a mosquito in your yard, it probably hatched within 100 feet of where you are. Because freshwater mosquitoes are weak flyers. So recently there was a case where they discovered a mosquito in Manorville that tested positive for Eastern equine encephalitis. And so then the county is petitioning the state to grant an exception for mosquito spraying, to declare a state of emergency. Now, there's been 0 cases of equine encephalitis on Long Island, and on the average of 7 per year in the country, right? So, basically, these are bureaucrats with budgets who refuse to let go of their power, and it's a shame, and the politicians will basically cave to the people phoning in. So I'm getting eaten alive here. So I'd say what each of us should be doing is calling BS on these scare tactics that are really all about justifying nuisance spraying at the same time that they're destroying the marshes.
Is it on your Facebook page that would get the most? Like, should our members like the Save the Great South Bay Facebook page in order to see the information, or where is the information that will educate us?
So this is one of our challenges, Jean, is actually as a non-scientist, it's Robin again. As a
Yeah,
non-scientist,
hi.
it can feel very overwhelming, and I feel sometimes like I have to learn a new vocabulary in learning this topic. And so one of our biggest challenges is how to share the information and how to educate people. So I'm curious to hear maybe from your members of Long Island Women in Tech. We have a Facebook page. We have a Facebook group that's closed that has more in-depth conversations going on. We do have a website with a lot of information and links on there. But how can we use technology better or differently to spread information, broken down so that it's digestible for the average public person who doesn't have a scientific background?
I have an idea.
Let's hear it.
I don't know how we'll get it done, but eventually it should get done. One thing that is for certain, I do spend a lot of time outdoors on Long Island. I try to, at least with my kids. And I'm wondering if there's a way to report something that's happened, right? A way to bring the attention to Marshall and his team to say, hey, we saw something pretty intense happening here, or, look at this area of the ground. Maybe there's an app that allows people to communicate on that level, and report things to you guys, right? So that we'll have eyes and ears everywhere is what I'm thinking. That's one thing. Also, that same app could provide tips and goals for each homeowner who has a yard and has to manage that yard. That would be another way to keep people accountable, and especially for people who are part of this group joining in here because we want to learn about this topic. If you gave me a task list, I'd get it done. If you gave me a task list in an app, it's done already. So I think that's the type of thing I'm thinking about for how you can connect technology with people's daily lives. Obviously creating events that allow people to come out and do together helps, but for us busy, I'm a working mom, so I'll say working moms on Long Island, it's much easier if I can make it in my everyday life of something I think about, with an app on my phone that reminds me, hey, have you checked out this new pesticide and how it's affecting your environment? It brings that knowledge to me that I didn't even know existed. Like that pesticide you just talked about, I didn't realize it's in my dog's flea collar.
Really?
So, like I'm looking at it, and as soon as I Google that pesticide, the flea collar comes up, and I'm like, oh no,
Really?
These are things that I didn't know. And if it were something that kind of came to me on a regular basis, and an app alert or whatnot, I would keep a lot more. This would be part of my mind and my daily routine, rather than it being one time a year event that I go and clean up the creek with my kid.
Stefana, do you feel like Facebook is an option for spreading that information? We just started actually yesterday with our postings on native planting. September is a great planting season. Many people plant then. And we just started, it's going to be every Tuesday and Thursday, we will post on, yesterday was download our free EPUB, our free book on native plantings and how to do it in your yard.
Yeah.
That's a great link we'll share with you guys. Thursday will be the top 5 most invasive species, and we know what they look like. So people, really break it down. But I don't,
I
I'm
think
not sure
that
Facebook
is a good platform for a lot of homeowners on Long Island. It is not the only platform. I think the thing that we fail to recognize is that the Facebook is where everyone shares their pictures, their life. Maybe they go out there to learn something new. They're probably not seeing Save the Great South Bay every time they log in. I'll be honest with you, I've kind of walked away from Facebook a lot in the past few months because of the negativity there. And I see a lot of other people, especially younger people, not my age group, that are leaving the platform or don't even have access to the platform. So it is one arm, in my mind, to your advocacy work. I think Instagram is important. Twitter presence is important, and Snapchat is important to mobilize the younger groups of people to learn about these things. I'll also be honest with you, on Long Island Women in Tech, we have 500 some odd members. They react the most through email.
Really? Uh-huh.
I hate to say it, but that's how I get in touch with you guys. So I would say Long Islanders who are busy watching Facebook to kind of numb their minds, not to learn something new, email is where they take action. That's why I think like the app idea was so important to me, because it requires me every day to look at an alert or a text message once every 2 weeks that says, here's our action for the next 2 weeks.
Right.
I follow a bunch of political figures, and I allow them to text me an action every 2 weeks, right? That gives me something to do. But I don't want more, because I've got too much on my plate. I mean, that's my feedback so far. I'm sure other people have different ways they like to communicate.
Yeah, anybody have any other ideas to share? One thing that comes to my mind is before the process, before where you communicate, what I think is the most important is the establishing the trust, that this is a source of information that I trust, and I then don't need to be the expert. I can just go right to the actions and process it. So I feel like this group really, if you can get those in-person opportunities to talk about what you're doing and why, you'll just keep increasing the amount of trust that people have, like myself. I mean, I went to a couple of events, and now it's like I'm right there with Stefana. Just give me the checklist of what I need to do, and if your organization, your foundation has vetted it, I'm good. Like I can trust that. So
well,
I think that combination.
We've been consciously trying to pivot away from Facebook as our main means of communication, so that things are coming from our website, a place where the content is static and where we can control the messaging and the branding. Facebook, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. There's not really the opportunity to have any extended analysis, and content is anything but static. So to your point, Stefana, what we should do is to create and Jean as well, we should have a page which would be a permanent presence on our site, and that would address specifically how one can handle the mosquito / pesticide issue. What are best practices, like emptying your gutters and your bird bath, any standing water in your yard. Get a bat house. Get some purple martins. Yeah. And if it's deer ticks, guess what? Possums. Not that I should say you should put possums in your yard, but that's actually they'll eat thousands of deer ticks a day, believe it or not. Some static go-to information. We also are playing with a mapping app called Land Grid. It has every property lot in Nassau and Suffolk, actually 135 million nationally. And with a phone app, you can geotag information onto that property lot. Let's say the house is adjoining a creek, and in the creek there's a boat that's sunk. You could take a picture of the boat sitting in the creek and then upload it right to that property lot immediately, and then just send the link to the town and say, there's the boat, there's the location, what are you going to do about it? So there's a lot of things that could be tagged, geotagged and then posted for further action.
Or to make that simpler for you guys, if you see something, say something. I'm almost thinking like the app we have at school for the kids. like the bullying reporting app, or like New York City has the See Something, Say Something. You can communicate to us through Facebook or Messenger or email, or through our website. If you do see something, let us know so we can check it out. We have developed really great relationships with Town of Islip, Town of Babylon, Town of Brookhaven, that cover all of the South Shore. They are very environmentally aware, but they can't be everywhere all the time. So they really need to know if things are out there. And that's a tremendous help for them as well.
I think about it like, I'll give a little water analogy. So throw a pebble onto a still body of water, and all of those ripples just keep cascading out. And it's each one of these type of conversations that you're having and education that you're providing, it becomes more and more ripples, where now more people, and this is a small group, but we're an engaged, committed group. And we now, with education, can get more engagement, can get more advocacy going, and really lead to all the actions that need to happen.
One of the things I find, Jean, is we have a lot of companies reach out to us. It seems to be an upsurge in the corporate conscience activity that's going on. Companies
I
that
think
reach out
we need
to us
to be
and
sharing that out, Robin.
Yeah, companies who say, hey, we want to encourage our employees to volunteer on something. How do we get involved in your organization? And we'll turn around and say to them, there's Emerald Document Imaging, for example. They show up with a team of people at our cleanups, and each company rewards their employees in their own way, whether it's internal recognition or comp time or no reward at all. Just, this is what we require of our employees or ask of them.
I also would recommend to diversify your board of directors.
Well, we
do not tell me you have Karen and that's your answer.
We're
they're
looking.
all white males except for Karen, and that is not the demographic of Long Island. So consider looking into that in the future.
Well, we are actively looking for new board members. So, and anybody you'd be willing to nominate, we'll take a look.
Particularly in the technology sector. The board does consist
Yeah, go ahead, Robin.
The board does consist of a variety of backgrounds, which I think is very important to our organization. We have people who have specialized knowledge in the native plantings, people with specialized knowledge in shellfish restoration, people with specialized knowledge in the legal side of all these things, and also policy. It's important to understand how municipalities and governments make their decisions so that we can help to influence those decisions in a productive way. So,
and these are all volunteers, correct?
These are all volunteers. That is correct.
That's amazing.
That is correct.
I guess, Marshall, we are at time before people drop off. Are there any parting words you'd like to share, or anything?
Well, I'd love to see you at some of our events coming up. We're going to be representing at the Seafood Festival in West Sayville. That's the 24th and 25th of August. Also, the 25th of August, there is the Great South Bay Paddleboard Race, which is just a real spectacle to view.
Okay.
And fun, if you're a paddleboarder, this is a must. That's at the Bayshore Yacht Club. Then we have September 14th is the Oyster Fest at Blue Island Oysters. That's in West Sayville. That's like the Great South Bay Paddleboard Race is that's their 5th year. This is their 4th year at the Oyster Fest. Then the 21st, we are reviving a tradition on the bay. It's the Mayor's Charity Cup Regatta. So we're gathering together top sailors on the bay. That's going to be at the Long Island Yacht Club, which itself has resurrected itself from the ashes, and that's in Babylon. And then we have the second in our speaker series coming up October 18th, and that's about shellfish restoration. We have a couple of, four different cleanups, Robin, on the calendar as well?
Yes, for end of September, beginning of October.
Uh-huh.
I would
And
love to see the Long Island Women in Tech have a table at the regatta. It's local, and there'll be a lot of educational information there, as well as our entire board will be there. So it's a great place to learn from the different perspectives.
plus oysters and live music
Oh yeah, and the oysters and live music, and cold beer.
and cold beer. So
I will summarize all of that and share it out with our group.
terrific. Well, thanks, Jean, for hosting this. Thanks to Long Island Women in Tech. Robin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
You know, Marshall, we've been learning so much about all our precious natural resources, and I think of time as one of our most precious resources. So I'd also like to thank you for educating us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Talk soon.
Bye, Jean.
Thank you guys.